December 27, 1979. Taj Beg Palace, Kabul. The temperature hovers just above freezing, but inside the marble corridors, the air is thick with cordite and the metallic tang of fresh blood. KGB Alpha Group operators move through the darkness wearing Afghan army uniforms, their boots silent against polished stone. In the left hand of each operative, a standard-issue combat knife. In the right hand, a suppressed Stechkin pistol. Two weapons, 2 points of failure, 2 sounds that could compromise the mission. But somewhere in the bowels of Tzan-i-Tokhmash, the Soviet Union's most secretive weapons research institute, engineers are already designing the solution. A weapon so intimate, so psychologically devastating that it would redefine close-quarters assassination. A blade that doesn't just cut, a blade that shoots you in the face. This is the story of the NRS-2, the knife that fires bullets, the weapon that should not exist. Afghanistan, 1980. The Soviet 40th Army bleeds into the Hindu Kush Mountains, hemorrhaging men and material into an unwinnable war. Spetsnaz reconnaissance units operate alone, sometimes for weeks, deep behind Mujahideen lines. They carry survival knives to cut detonator cord, open ration tins, and silently eliminate sentries. They carry suppressed pistols for close-range killing. But 2 weapons mean 2 things that can fail, 2 things that make noise, 2 things that add weight to an already overburdened operator. The Soviet military-industrial complex does not tolerate inefficiency. At Tasnitokhmash, the Central Research Institute for Precision Machine Building, a Kafkaesque name for a factory of death, weapons designers receive their directive from the GRU: create a single instrument that serves as survival tool, combat knife, and silent firearm. The specifications read like a fever dream. It must cut through steel cable. It must kill silently at 5 meters. It must leave no forensic evidence. It must weigh less than 600 grams. The result would be designated 6P31 in official documents. Its operators would call it Vzmak. The Wave. History would remember it as the NRS-2, Nozrazvedchika Specjalny, Fwamra, scout firing knife. Hold the NRS-2 in your hands, and your first thought is how ordinary it appears. A fixed-blade knife, 290 millimeters long, high-carbon steel blade with a serrated spine designed specifically for sawing through detonator cord. The handle is wrapped in textured black polymer, ergonomic, unremarkable. It weighs 570 grams, slightly heavier than a standard combat knife, but not suspiciously so. Then you notice the barrel. It emerges not from where you expect, not from the blade, not from the crossguard, but from the butt of the handle. A 60mm barrel bored directly through the knife's grip, pointing backward when you hold it in a stabbing position. The firing mechanism is hidden entirely, within the handle's hollow cavity, accessible only when you press the opening lever and rotate the barrel outward, like opening a macabre jewelry box. The ammunition is stranger still. The 7.62 Sands and 41mm SP4 cartridge was originally developed for the PSS silent pistol, itself a weapon that reads like science fiction. The SP4 uses a captive piston system. When fired, the propellant ignites and drives a piston forward, which pushes the bullet out of the casing. But the piston never leaves the cartridge. All expanding gases remain trapped inside the brass. No muzzle report, no sonic crack, no expelled casing tumbling to the floor to betray your position. The bullet exits at 140 meters per second. Subsonic, silent, lethal. At point-blank range, it penetrates 25 millimeters of pine board. More importantly, it penetrates a Soviet steel helmet or a human skull. Loading the NRS-2 is a ritual of mechanical precision. Press the opening lever with your thumb. Feel the barrel rotate outward with a soft click that sounds too loud in the silence. Insert the SP4 cartridge into the chamber. The brass is short, fat, pregnant with compressed death. Rotate the barrel back into the handle. the two prongs locking into the outer latch with mechanical finality. Pull the flip-up lever on the right side to cock the internal hammer. You feel the spring tension through your palm, a coiled snake waiting to strike. The safety catch sits beside the barrel, a small switch that requires deliberate manipulation. Soviet doctrine: nothing fires by accident. Your left hand grips the underside of the handle. Your right hand wraps around the side, index finger resting on the push-button trigger protruding above the safety. The firing position is awkward, unnatural. This is not a weapon designed for marksmanship. This is a weapon designed for execution. When fired, the NRS-2 produces 122 decibels, quieter than a door slamming, quieter than a dry cough in a concrete room. Across a mountain valley in the chaos of combat, it is indistinguishable from environmental noise. In a dark hallway, pressed against a target's temple, it is the last sound they hear. The NRS-2 represents a fundamental philosophical divergence between Soviet and Western special operations doctrine. American forces worship at the altar of standoff distance, long-range rifles, air support, overwhelming firepower delivered from a position of safety. The Western operator eliminates threats before they become threats, engaging from hundreds of meters with precision optics and match-grade ammunition. The Soviet operator embraces proximity. He moves close enough to smell his target's fear, close enough to see the whites of their eyes in the moment before darkness. The NRS-2 is effective to 25 meters but designed for use under 5. At that range, you can hear your target breathing. At that range, you can watch the light leave their eyes. This is psychological warfare weaponized. The NRS-2 doesn't just kill, it terrorizes. Imagine being a Mujahideen sentry posted in a mountain pass on a moonless night. You feel the blade enter your ribs from behind, a cold intrusion that steals your breath. As you gasp, trying to scream, your assailant rotates you around. You see his face for the first time. Then you see the knife handle pressed against your forehead. The last thing you hear is a sound like a dry twig snapping. In 1986, the United States Congress passed the Ballistic Knife Prohibition Act, banning the manufacture and sale of ballistic knives, spring-powered weapons that launched detachable blades. The legislation was fueled by Cold War paranoia and sensationalist media reports about Soviet Spetsnaz super soldiers carrying futuristic knife guns. But Congress banned the wrong weapon. True ballistic knives, spring-powered novelties that eject their blades, were Cold War curiosities, inaccurate and impractical. The NRS-2 is not a ballistic knife. It doesn't launch anything. It's a gun disguised as a knife, a deception so elegant that Western intelligence agencies didn't fully understand it until the Soviet Union collapsed. The Americans had nothing equivalent. The closest analog, carrying both a Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife and a suppressed .22 pistol, required two weapons, neither purpose-built for the other's role. When the Tula Arms Plant began manufacturing the NRS-2 in 1986, it represented a technological achievement the West wouldn't match for decades. Even today, no NATO military issues a comparable weapon. But the NRS-2 carries a fatal flaw encoded in its design. It fires a single shot. Miss once because your target moved, because your hand shook, because the hammer misfired, and you're holding an empty gun in a knife fight. The margin for error is measured in millimeters, the consequence of failure measured in body bags. The weapon requires extreme close quarters, typically under 5 meters. At that range, you've already lost the element of surprise. At that range, your target can fight back. The psychological burden on operators became legendary. Using the NRS-2 meant you'd already failed at stealth, already compromised your position, already descended to the level of medieval combat in a modern war. The SP4 cartridge, for all its ballistic brilliance, uses corrosive primers that eat away at the barrel. The complex firing mechanism jams in dust, freezes in mountain cold, corrodes in jungle humidity. Maintenance is a nightmare of tiny springs and precision-machined parts that can only be serviced by armorers with specialized training. And so, the NRS-2 never became standard issue. It remained a specialist's weapon, issued to GRU reconnaissance units and KGB Alpha Group operators for specific missions requiring absolute silence and plausible deniability. Production numbers remain classified. Exact usage statistics remain sealed in Kremlin archives. Today, the NRS-2 continues service with Russian Spetsnaz and FSB Special Operations Groups. Ukrainian forces captured several examples during the ongoing conflict, photographing them with a mixture of fascination and dread. A non-firing variant, the NR-2, designated 6P32, exists as a training knife, the firing mechanism replaced with survival equipment. But the questions remain unanswered. How many lives did this weapon actually take? How many throats were cut before bullets were fired point-blank into faces? How many operators carried it into the mountains of Afghanistan, the jungles of Angola, the streets of Grozny? The archives remain sealed. The operators who used it remain silent, bound by oaths to governments that no longer exist. The NRS-2 exists in that peculiar Cold War twilight, too classified to be history, too real to be legend. Somewhere in a Moscow vault, the production records gather dust. Somewhere in the mountains of Central Asia, spent SP-4 casings lie buried in unmarked graves. And somewhere in the dark corners of modern warfare, the blade that shoots you in the face still whispers its secrets to those with the clearance to listen. The knife remains sharp, the chamber remains ready, and the Soviet Union's most intimate instrument of death continues its work in the shadows where history refuses to look.